Today on Rethink Real Estate, we have Singh. Now, he's been generous enough to jump on today and give us some insights into mindful leadership. What does mindful leadership mean? It's something that I asked him in the beginning of the episode, and he gives us some tips and tricks. I try to make sure that we always come back to the fact that we run small businesses, essentially, a lot of us, in the sense that your own real estate business is a small business, and you might have a few people on your team or whatever it may be. And leadership tends to be an afterthought that once the team grows because people follow you in the wake of what you're creating, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, hang on a second, how do I lead them properly? The term mindful leadership, it feels one of those things that might be a little bit more spiritual, but that said, it's very practical in the way that he explains it and the way that we need to be mindful in the decisions that we make. We speak also about crisis hacks. How do we deal with crisis in those moments also? And how do you identify the feelings that come up during that so that your muscle memory, so to speak, your brain acknowledges it as you move forward? Again, some really good practical tips that he shares with us throughout this episode. Hopefully you do enjoy. Welcome to Rethink Real Estate. My name is Ben Brady, and this is a real estate podcast aimed to deliver sales strategies, marketing tips, and business insights from industry experts and myself to build a listing-focused business for the future. Let's get into it. Singh, welcome to Rethink Real Estate.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited to talk about what the topics that obviously are your specialties. But for somebody that's just joining the episode now, why should they stick around? What will they learn?
In today's world, there are two extremes that's going on, right? On one side, it's a dog eat dog kind of environment where it's cutthroat, fast-paced, growth at all costs, right? On the other side, some of the company has taken them more overly spiritual approach of companies where mindfulness, yoga, gongs punctuate all day long, right? Or it's all about how can we be compassionate, but they're not being compassionate. They're being um, in compassionate in the sense that they say, "I want to value you," but without understanding what you really need, right? So
Right.
what we are providing in the market right now, and it's very critical to understand the balance between the two. The real challenge for modern leaders is finding a balanced approach to be able to cultivate that presence, that clarity, and emotional resilience in the ever changing world.
Right.
So
Well, I think that's got me going, oh, there's so much we could dive into on there. We can double click on every single one of those points.
yeah, and we have a very standard structured what we call leadership mastery compass and a complete program. And just in 2024, in the last 8-9 months, and this is the data that we have just assimilated and we are starting to put out. Um, 24 some companies, not individuals, that's on the program. 24 some companies with at least 20 employees plus. We have seen their decision making precision and productivity increase by 40%. And we run our program with very standard KPIs that you can actually measure. So this is something new that does not exist in any mindful program who can walk in and say, hey, let's sit down. Here are 20 KPIs. We are going to benchmark today. And
Yep.
in 12 weeks program, we will show you how those KPIs are moving.
So what does mindful leadership actually mean? Like, because it's a broad terminology. Leadership is something that gets thrown around in the self-help marketplace all the time. What is the difference between normal leadership or just leadership and mindful leadership? Where's the intersect, so to speak?
So I will tell you, I'll give you this answer in a long way with a context on it was also how I thought about having this whole program and everything. This is back in 2020, October during COVID. On a Friday, we had a ransomware attack, and I was chief technology officer, chief operating officer of the company. Uh, and although all technical folks are trained and the entire company is trained on malware, ransomware, but when it actually hit us, right, and everything was blocked, we came out of it without paying ransomware in less than 30 hours, right? And after that, I got invited in like 5, 6, 7 podcasts and webinars back to back. And I start thinking, well, this came very natural to me. This was very normal for me to solve this problem. Why it is such a big deal for people to think. And then I reflected back. The main difference is mindful word itself means that you are being very precise, active, and present in the moment, right? And when you are precisely present in the moment and focusing on what you have in front of you, you create a very different level of clarity to be able to not only make decisions, but also to respect feelings and emotions of others,
Mm.
right? I give that example of ransomware because you can only imagine the CEO of the company, all the CXO of the company are going like, "Oh, what the hell?" Right? Everybody's
Yeah.
trying to Google and trying to find out an answer, and at the same time, I have to protect my team at that point who is going to be solving it, so they don't get bombarded with questions, right? On one side, I have to get everybody comfortable that hey, we got this. Even if I am panicking inside, I have to manage that emotional balance of that, right? It's one extreme I'm giving, I know. But those extreme, what has happened today is a lot of leaders, they fall in one of three categories. One category is this macro, whatever you want to call it, the mindset of I know everything has isolated them as they have grown in ranks. And now they don't have anyone, even their family, to share where this whole mental health issue is coming.
Mm.
The second bucket is leaders who compromise the delivery of results because they want to be overly sensitive about everything else on how that you do. So those are two very difficult buckets where decision making, driving results in the company, moving forward, right? Those things become very quickly very complex, and they don't have answers for that. And then there are third set of leaders where they understand it, but we have never been trained and educated in
Mm.
this kind of leadership mindset, right? And the reason for launching also was the digital change that has happened.
Right.
So if you look at till early mid thousands, right, till 2008, 2009, that time frame, most of the leadership training that was done, it was done in a group, right, in a team, in a physical location on a topic. So
Yep.
everyone who got in that location for 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, whatever that was, they all were trained to the same level on that topic. What digital explosion has done is you and I both have access to mindful programs all over the world. But based on your experience, you are making your own perception of what you need. I'm making my own perception of what I need. So if I sit down and say, okay, today we are going to focus on resilience. Resilience in my 5 people team will mean very different for everyone. How do I
Yeah.
bring everybody on the same page?
Yep.
That's where we need a holistic program that is taking and bringing people from different levels in different skills and putting them all on the same page. That's where we needed a compass to be able to say, no, not everyone needs everything.
Right.
Let's look at your leadership team. Second level, third level, whatever you want to work with. The first thing is let's evaluate that where everyone stays. The biggest gap that we have seen is the fundamental purpose. If you ask what is the purpose, the individual's purpose does not align with company's purpose, right? Just that simple.
Right.
Your intention and your purpose not being aligned with company's purpose, there always going to be retention issues. There's
Yeah.
always going to be satisfaction issue. There is always going to be team conflicts. So
Can
I
you?
know I'm answering in a long way, but
But so
yeah.
I guess that my first part of this though, that I listened to everything, the different three styles that are there. I understand that, it's a new digital era in the sense of how we lead people, and the
Mm,
working from home element side of things is much different now as well. And that connection part of it is tough. But
mm.
there are natural leaders and then there are not natural leaders. Can somebody that isn't a natural leader, can they learn to be a leader? Or is it or is there a very clear segregation? Like, can you go, no, they're not meant to be leaders, or yes, they can be? Is that something in leadership that you can tell based on what you've done?
So my experience in last 25 years, I have built some of the most productive teams from Fortune 100 companies to
Hmm.
venture capital firms. Uh, I firmly believe that yes, there are born leaders,
Hmm.
but that leadership skill does not translate into what I am talking about,
Right,
right? The leadership skill that a percent of population has, inherent to them, right? They are again very focused in that one segment of leadership, right?
right,
They
right.
might be very good at sales and they can teach people how to sell. They might be very good at technical stuff and they can teach people how to manage technical stuff. There can be people who are real. I've seen some amazing leaders who never went through any formal training and are one of the best HR human resource executives in the world, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
then they're only good for that. What I'm talking about is the segment where today 80% population has to take leadership action. We expect them to become leaders not by position, by action, right? And
Right.
this exercise is for that 80% who want to actually focus that. Or so let's say in a company, if you hire 20 people, you don't want just two or three performers, right? You
Right.
want
Right.
18 or 19 performers. So the idea here is, how do we bring that solution that can help grow the entire, lift the entire organization rather than just one or two people. Now, I do have executive coaching independently that I people enroll, but the example I gave you was exclusively for the companies with 20 plus people, because I personally believe that's where the value is.
Right. 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 Right.
I'm not saying that individuals cannot come to me. Definitely, I help them, serve them. But from a see, my goal with this whole mindful leadership, and somebody was asking me yesterday, I'm actually launching a podcast dedicated to this from tomorrow on the Transformation Network. And my goal is to have 200,000 individuals develop 1 minute mindful practice in next 2 years.
Okay. So what does that look like? What is a mindful practice? Like, what is something that you could actually give us an example of? Somebody going from just a particular leadership style of actually showing up and
Mhm.
leading by example is, I think, the default style of most
Right.
people. Okay.
Mhm.
What is a mindful exercise, or what is something that is mindful within leadership that you can give us an example of?
Okay, I'll give you not only an example, I will actually give a tool to your audience.
Okay.
And I have all these tools that I speak from stage and workshops and everything else, right? And most of my tools come with very simple acronyms. So let's talk about in this one, stop. STOP.
Yep.
Nobody can forget stop, right? You always see a signal, you always see something stopped, you're always asked to stop. So stop. Let's put that. What is stop? Next time you see, you stop something, you stop working or stop doing something, you stop your car, whatever you do, in that moment, just stop yourself. Look at the thought that you had. ST. T is for thought. The thought, the last thought that you had. Observe the emotions and the body's reaction to that thought.
Mm.
This is scientific. The scientific thing is that your body starts giving signatures and signals before the brain accepts the emotion.
Right.
Fire is a very good example. By the time you light a fire and you burn yourself, there is a fraction of second before the brain actually feels the heat.
Right.
So and then he is, just put a name, put a label to that emotion so that your brain now knows this thought, this emotions goes together, right? Just take a deep breath. feel that in 30 seconds, you just had the first intentional, mindful exercise.
Yeah, that's good.
Now you fast forward this, right? I'm going in a meeting.
Mm.
60% leaders, and this is my statistics with people that hundreds of people that I engage. 60% leaders for the first 10% of the meeting are busy thinking about the previous conversation,
Right.
right? So you are not being honest to yourself and the people that you are in meeting with. Towards the tail end of the meeting, 25% tail end of the meeting, everybody is busy on what's next.
Mm-hmm.
That's being mindful. If your work can be done in 15 minutes, why do you want to waste 30 minutes? If you are just present there, you and I are having conversation, right? If I am just present here and I'm able to explain you everything, why would we need another call,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
that's
and
true.
that simple exercise increases your satisfaction. See, the thing about emotions is all negative emotions that a person has is because a particular need is not getting filled.
Right.
So, for example, if you are thirsty and you do not get water, you will have a negative emotion. If you're
Mm-hmm.
hungry, you do not get food, you will have a negative emotion. But the positive emotion comes only when a value is fulfilled,
Mm-hmm.
not a need. So when you are thirsty, you drink water does not mean you will be the most joyous person on earth, right? But if you stand for something, if you have your personal values, even if you're hungry, but your value is fulfilled, right? You will be joyous even when you're hungry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm curious about all of the like being mindful in the midst of crisis is one of the most difficult things. Now,
Yes.
crisis can mean something very different to many leaders in the sense that
Hmm.
a crisis could be a deal falling apart, or it could be something relatively catastrophic, right?
Hmm.
So, in those moments, tools like stop, for example,
Hmm.
you know, I think that there's definitely tools that you can relate to, but it's so hard when the cortisol and the adrenaline and everything is running through you at that individual point in time to actually sit in that moment and use those tools. So, what are some of the things? Is it the reality of practicing in smaller moments so that when the bigger moments come through, how does that crisis? What are the crisis hacks, so to speak?
Uh, so even if we talk about real estate industry, right? It's
Hmm.
it's it's always a marathon. There's no sprint in real estate,
Yep.
right? And what you have to embrace is acts to avoid getting burnt out while maintaining the drive for the long haul, right? That's a very different than in a sports where it's always about that next win and then you have some break to get to the next one. So
Yep.
in that situation, yes, to your point, if you think about the compass that I mentioned, right? So there are four aspects of of the compass. So think, just play with me for a second. I just gave you the stop exercise. What that allows you to do is become present in that moment,
Okay.
right? If you are present in a moment, let's say there is a heated conversation and a deal is falling off,
Yep.
right? You can immediately just take that deep breath. And the moment you do that and you have this practice going on, what will happen is you will have an appreciation of the limitation in the conversation,
Hmm.
right? So, what mindfulness does is it gives you that space before you react,
Right.
right? And there's scholars, there are research that if you give 20-second gap between your reaction and your thought, you will have better response,
More mindful response.
right? And that's why whether it was Barack Obama, but any good leader, any good orator or speaker, they speak slow because before they speak out, they're chewing their word in their head.
Right. Right. And for some leadership styles, obviously, like I speak to my own leadership style and running our team. Sometimes I verbally process in front of them, and sometimes as a leader, you feel like you have to fill the gap, so to speak, and that is a tough thing when my style of leadership is definitely is more controlled in the
Hmm.
sense that I'm trying to control everything that happens. It's probably micromanaged. It's also at the point of that I try to lead through inspiring, but most of the
Hmm.
time you don't have those inspiring thoughts. You actually have to just well, what I do is verbally process in the moment in order to communicate with my team, and then at the end of that, I'm very clear on what's happening at that point, even though I went into the meeting unclear around how it was going to look. So that that right there is probably down to preparation more than anything. As far as preparation more than anything, as far as probably not preparing in that situation in order to actually be purposeful and be mindful in that moment. I think that
There's
it's one
a
of those things.
very well articulated problem, and it's a very
Yeah.
common problem. So let me give you another tool, and very quickly I will explain this, and your audience will love it. I was trained on this almost 12 years back. I know everybody goes through some kind of leadership training in corporate life. It was some kind of desk, but in a very catchy way. So think about a four quadrant, right? So on the top right is eagle, then you owl, and then you have parrot and dove, right? And the point is that if you think about those personalities of those birds, so parrot,
Mhm.
eagles are high flying, they want to connect in seconds. If these are the leaders for which that escalator pitch was created, right?
Yep. Yep.
Uh, if you cannot connect in 30 seconds, then you lose them. The
Yep.
owls are also predators, but then they have analysis paralysis. They can sit and sit and sit and sit, but when they attack very furiously, right? Then you have dove, who are people person. These are people who will never make any decisions unless they can make sure that everybody in their company is safe. Nobody is getting impacted. How can I minimize the impact on people? And then you have parrots. Parrots are people who have to talk to have their brain think and articulate,
Yep.
right? So I'll give my own example. At that time, I was head of sales operations for Fortune 100 company, and one of my direct report was a parrot, and he was head of training. With all my other direct reports, my meeting used to be done in 5 minutes, and I used to avoid this guy because I knew once he comes in my office, for the first 30 minutes, I will not get any answer from him, right? But when I went through that training, I realized how immature I was, right? Because every individual has all four aspects of those birds. We have to figure out what is our dominant personality, what is your dominant personality, and how do I bring down and change my personality to meet your personality,
Mm. Yeah.
right? I would say that was a huge transformation in my personal life.
Right.
And coming out of that, I used to set up 2 hour meeting with him to make sure I actually get to understand what he wants to say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. But I guess that there's this new style of leadership, or there has to be a new style of leadership. There's a great deal of remote leadership that's needing to be have had. Like there's a great deal of people that still are buying into the fact that if you're not close to your boss, you can't get a promotion. You need to make sure that you're trying to get to the office and all of those different things. How do you lead a team that you never really interact with? Like from a digital perspective, how have you seen those practices now to be able to lead? Because there's also this other breakdown of leadership as well as now with a lot of people working from home. I know myself within my team, it's funny. There's a great deal of people that want to actually work from home a small amount,
Mhm.
but as a leader, and this maybe more to speak about me than anything else, you think immediately when somebody's at home versus in the office and you can physically see them, you think, well, are they working as hard as what they need to, or getting that stuff done, or being as efficient as possible? And that second guessing comes into it. And I think that there's a lot of second guessing that's coming into it now. Like you see that people have to be logged into the system and moving
Yeah,
their
yeah,
mouse and
yeah,
things like that. It
yeah.
just seems very. It seems like a very interesting landscape.
So I have been there, done that, right? So where mindfulness comes in that also from a leadership standpoint is um, I'm not saying somebody is right, wrong, indifferent, right? All I'm saying is what is the path forward collectively and things that's actually working in the market. Yes, there are a segment of your population, it's like a bell curve, right? You have people who will always cheat, so to speak, in being productive, right? And then there are people who are always over efficient in being productive,
Mhm.
right? So those two, if you take away those two segments, everybody is sitting in that bell curve and you're trying to move as many people possible towards being productive, right? So the way I approach it, the way I look at it and I train on it is I step back and say, okay, let's put every individual as an individual human first.
Mhm.
In my 47 years life, I haven't met a single soul who gets out of bed and decides to be biggest pain for everyone on earth. I'm yet to meet a soul, right? Who actually gets out of bed and says, okay, today I'm going to make this world the worst possible place on earth. No, right? So there are things that happens from the point I get out of bed and I have my first professional engagement and interaction, right? Now, that's where we as leaders have to start compartmentalizing those episodes that's impacting that individual.
Mm.
Anything that is internal and personal at the family and that thing, there's nothing we can do about. We cannot control those, right? But we can have the true empathy to give them space and have that conversation. What support do you need to fix this?
No, it's a strong point. It's a strong point and a
Right?
strong angle. That's for sure.
Rather than not getting, have you, I mean, okay, I get that HR gets in the way, you should not ask this, you should not ask that. Yes, there is a human resource proof way of asking those questions. And I
But
talk with
again,
a lot of ethics
but
professors.
but I think that the HR side of things, from a large company scale perspective, it's more so on the internal perspective, like on a small scale company that we're talking about within real estate, where they are the HR, they are everything
Right,
in that
right.
situation.
And my point there is that it's not about policies, it's not
Mm,
about structures, right? It is about being literally mindful. Mindfulness means that your mind is already full.
mm,
It's not about stopping anything. Your sense, think about this thing. The neurons in your brain never stops firing, right? The five senses that we have is capturing more information than we can process. All it takes is that pause.
mm,
All it takes is that 30-second pause, a deep breath to realize what's happening,
right.
right? You extend that conversation in situations where somebody did not meet a deadline. Yes, that person needs to be addressed, right? You have a choice of letting go of that resource or you have choice to fix that resource,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? The problem is fixing needs you as a leader to put effort and nobody wants to put effort.
Right.
I'm not saying that every resource that you hire is going to be the best resource in the world, but my question is who made that decision to hire and bring them on board,
Yep.
right? It was us, leaders.
Yep.
So who
Yep.
has the ownership,
The responsibility. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Well, I
right?
think that I think that there's a refreshing part in this, seeing that it's wonderful to understand as people that are, small business owners
Mhm.
technically that are out there at the moment in the real estate landscape, navigating. People just think putting people on their team is one thing, but being able to actually lead them to get the most out of them is a complete other. Because one of the largest, I think, difficulties within real estate is the fact that as a broker or as somebody that runs an office, you've got a whole bunch of independent contractors, and
Right.
then those independent contractors have independent contractors that then work for them as well. And that word independent also gets in the way of good leadership most of the time as well. There's this arm's length leadership style within real estate that I just think that people think that you need to have a paid employee or a paid position in order to
Mhm.
lead people well. Because if you're trying to do it for independent contractors, there's no good level of control. And I think control probably actually gets in the road of most good leadership styles.
I was trying not to go to that word control, right? So think about this. I mentioned that need versus value. Is need is control a need or a value? Control is a need, right? What causes that need? What creates that need? Insecurity,
Mm.
right?
Ego.
Being ego or being burnt out before, bad experience from prior,
Mm.
right? It can be a lot of different things. But that satisfaction, you're not getting that satisfaction. You're not getting that emotional connection because your need is not being filled. My question to those leaders is, what is the value that you are trying to do?
Mm.
Right? Yes, you want to control. Control is your default mechanism of
Sure.
reacting,
Sure.
right? But if you take a breath, what is the value? What is the outcome you're wanting in that situation, in that relationship, whether it is your employee, whether it is a contractor, whether it is your broker? What is the output you're wanting,
Yep.
right? And for that output, instead of controlling, let's change that to influencing,
Yeah. Influencing is a
right?
way better word to use than controlling.
No, actually, it's a whole different shift. That's a paradigm shift that I'm talking about with this whole compass thing. Is reframing of your context is very critical for success,
Right.
right? And when we talk about emotional agility, it's nothing but actually reframing. If you understand where your emotions are coming from, if somebody comes and snaps at me in the team meeting, right? As a senior leader, I can throw him out or throw
Mm.
her out, right? But did I solve what is I'm trying to get by that reaction,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's true.
Um, so why did that person, what did I trigger that led that person to snap? That needs patience, that needs effort. And that's what I'm trying to get to with leaders is leadership is a responsibility as much as it is a mission.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And where is the responsibility part of it? That you have the ability to respond, right? When you're responsible for something, you have the ability to respond. So why are you reacting all the time?
Yeah. Reactive leadership is obviously one of those things that most people probably fall back into that style of it because it's just
Mhm.
easy to. Yeah. Well, I think that, seeing through what we've spoken about today, obviously there's an extensive amount of knowledge from your perspective and experience that is there. We're going to make sure that all of your material and everything that you've got, the books, everything is all linked down in below in the show notes so that people can get in contact with you because leadership is something that I think doesn't get as much attention as it ultimately does need. It's one of those things that's an afterthought that after the
Mhm.
company grows, certainly in the real estate space, is that, oh, geez, I've got a few people here now. I need to probably figure out actually how I am going to lead them. It can be a
Mhm.
little bit of an afterthought. So we appreciate you jumping on to Rethink Real Estate today and giving us your insights and hopefully being a resource for the team for a long time to come. So thank you so much for jumping on.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure talking about it. I'm very passionate about this. Like I said, my goal is to give that 1 minute of mindfulness to 200,000 people in 2 years. I hope just that one example of stop and the four birds example I gave that might help at least you and a few listeners to help me get to that 200,000 number.
Well, again, we're happy to get you there. So thank you so much again.
Thank you, Ben. Have a great day.
So, about 75% of our audience hasn't liked, followed, or subscribed to our podcast. It would mean the world to us, and it would help this podcast more than you know to expand our reach if you were to like, follow, or subscribe on any of the platforms that you're watching or listening on. Thanks again.